Hello there. Welcome to all of you who are watching via replay. If we've not met, my name is Cory. I'm a husband, a father, podcaster, speaker. In fact, the podcast that I host is called Existential, which this broadcast you're watching right now, Existential Sunday, is an extension of. So welcome to all of you watching later, wherever you're watching it from. Welcome to all of you who are now watching live. Those of you coming in live, hello, good morning. Good to see you. This is a space that we've carved out for folks going through like a process of deconstructing or decolonizing their worldview. A lot of us come from like faith traditions, stuff like that, where we just, we talk about shit that's important, stuff that people care about, stuff that like matters in the world. And we talk about it in a way that's real honest and authentic, I think. So today, though, like I've been like really looking forward to this for really a really long time, actually. But so long, I'm actually getting a little nervous about it, to be honest with you. But today we've got my friend Linda Sarsour, who's going to be joining us. She's virtually backstage right now. And she's going to be joining us. And I kind of started referring to her myself as the person that if Keep That Same Energy was a person, because every time I see Linda, whether she's on television talking to somebody, whether she's at a rally, whether she's on her own Instagram, the energy is like always the same. It's like really life-giving. So you ever meet people that like just when you're around them, they I don't know how to describe it. They just give you life. So that's what Linda is. Hopefully you guys will experience the same thing. So without further ado, Linda Sarsour in the building.
Hey, Cory.
How are you?
I'm grateful to be alive and grateful to be here in conversation with you.
Yeah. Same. I'm grateful to be in conversation with you. We were just talking about our animals,
Animals are a blessing from God. That's what I believe.
Yeah, for sure. Now you actually were talking about that, like why you felt that way. And I think anybody who owns pets, I've heard this, just say what you said to me, because I think people resonate with that.
I think pets have a special like energy radar. Like they know when you're kind of feeling down. They sense sadness. They sense grief. And they come and give you comfort. And in fact, the studies have shown that the purrs, especially if you have cats, the purr from the cat is supposed to be an energy to kind of help calm you down. And I can attest to that it has absolutely helped me. The reason why I even got a cat in the first place, now I have two, but when I originally got a cat is because I was suffering from very severe anxiety during the Trump administration. It was actually in 2018 when I ended up getting a cat. I had been through so much and I was having literal panic attacks to the point where I thought I was like having heart attacks. Like I'm like telling my family I'm going to die. I'm sick. I can't. And then one day I'm scrolling on Facebook and I read this article about how cats help with anxiety. And I said, what the hell? Like I'm willing to try it. I'm willing to try anything. And I'm not going to, exaggerate. And I don't want to, just diagnose, people with anxiety by saying like, this is how you treat it. But I'm not going to lie, it worked for me. So cats are my medicine. So
yeah, so I love that story. So because you're not just like a random cat lady, you know what I'm saying? Like when you showed up with cats, it wasn't like you're not going to have 10 cats in your house just randomly.
Well, maybe when I'm like 80, Cory. Right now I live in a New York City apartment, so I think 2 is about enough, as much as I can handle right now.
And that's what I forgot to say too, that you are unapologetically from Brooklyn.
This is Brooklyn. I'm talking to you from Brooklyn, New York. This is the city. I believe Brooklyn's a city. I don't know if you know, but up until 1898, Brooklyn was its own city. And if Brooklyn were its own city, we would be the 4th largest city in all of the United States of America. Dang. Something happened where we ended up being part of the, quote, 5 boroughs. But one day we might get back to that whole Brooklyn situation. I haven't gotten to it yet, but I might get back on that campaign.
And you are unapologetically Palestinian.
Absolutely. Which is the most controversial part of my identity, as you probably know.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting, I mean, I'm actually getting ahead of myself because you talk about it in your book. You talked about like being in school and knowing that you're Palestinian and being like where you're looking on a map, you know what I mean? Having this conversation about Palestine. Like, could you talk a little bit about like that? Because I think sometimes stuff is controversial because people don't, sometimes it's a bit of a slippery slope what I'm about to say, but I think people don't actually understand the stories of people and know what it means to have been a part of or have your people come from a certain soil and the identity that you have in that. And then people just sort of look at you and go, well, she's whatever. So like, could you talk just about like the the attachment to Palestine, what it means to you.
It's the land of my parents, where my parents were born, my grandparents, my great, great, great grandparents. I can go back many generations. In fact, we actually have a family tree in this little book that one of my great grandparents had. And so that's the land that I connect my lineage to and my heritage to. Like, it's kind of like telling my parents, like, no, you weren't, you just made that up. You weren't born in a place called Palestine. Like, it's just so heartbreaking to every day walk around in a world where you have to like defend your existence. My existence does not require someone else not to exist. And I believe that is the worst form of self-determination. If your self-determination, Cory, requires me not to have self-determination or requires me not to exist, you shouldn't want that. You shouldn't want that type of self-determination. And so for me, even growing up as a kid, going to New York City public schools, we would be doing social studies, current events. And, the majority of the schools I went to were young people of color, Black, Caribbean, Latino and Asian. And of course, I was counted as part of like the West Asian kids. And kids didn't know where I was from. I wasn't like the girl from Pakistan where I can just go up to a map and be like, look, I'm from Pakistan or from Bangladesh, or the young girl who can go up and be like, I'm from Chile, I'm from Ecuador, It was kind of me and the Black kids. The Black kids, of course, knew, that they were African descendants, but of course they didn't know where in Africa they were from because they were descendants of enslaved people. I knew where I was from. I could show you where on the map I'm from, but it didn't say Palestine. And so having to explain to 12 and 13-year-olds in middle school that I'm from a place that they couldn't see on the map was so confusing for them, but also just really heartbreaking for me. Like, I didn't know what to do. I was like, sometimes I just kind of let it go. I'm like, I'm not going to continue to tell, even as a kid, just retelling your story, almost like people are looking at you, like, yeah, keep saying that until you believe it, until it's true. But I'm like, I know it's true because I've been there and my grandparents are there. Like, what's the problem? So yeah, it's very hard for young people, even young Palestinians today.
Yeah, man. And so the last thing I've heard you say, you're unapologetically Muslim. And I think it's so cool to me to watch you extract meaning from your faith in such a way that you act so intentionally. Like, so could you just talk a little bit about like your faith and how that has informed your work, the activism, the things that you've organized and been a part of?
Not only have I had to grow up and kind of defend the homeland of my parents, I have had to defend my faith. It's something that not many people have to do. And, anytime something around the world happens where the person who engages in an act of violence declares themselves a Muslim, somehow me in Brooklyn, New York, I'm responsible for that person. And we know this from watching white supremacists and right-wing evangelicals in America, that when they do what they do, of course, there are Christians like you who say, I'm not with that Christianity, I ain't with it. But overall, you don't see a whole group of white people being like, that's not our faith, that's not what we do. We kind of always say lone wolf, we're not with that pastor, he's saying some crazy stuff, that's not really us. But the Muslim community, we're somehow supposed to all stand together. We condemn this and we condemn that. And I don't want any part of that. It's not that when I condemn an act of violence that is committed by a Muslim, I do that because it's actually the right thing to do. And it's also my humanity that condemns it. I'm not going to just condemn things on behalf of 1.8 billion people. I don't want to be associated with violence because that is not what my faith is. And for us to claim that every time some horrible human being engages in a barbaric act of violence around the world, somehow they're related to me, or somehow I had something to do with it, or my mom or my community or the mosque that I went to, is just really absurd and outrageous. And so for me, I always say to people, and I do this and I preach this in the Muslim community, I'm not about telling you about Islam. I'm not going to sit Cory down and be like, here's the 5 pillars of Islam, here's what I believe. No, I'm going to show you what I believe. And that's how I show up in my faith. And for me, it's about, there's no show and tell here. This is about getting up and fighting for justice. It's about understanding that my faith teaches me that I can't go to bed at night knowing that my neighbors are hungry. I'm not going to walk over homeless people because God's going to ask me about that one day. I'm not going to sit at home in Brooklyn when Breonna Taylor is murdered in her home and just sit around and just be like, this must be how it is. I know that God did not want LMPD to go and murder Breonna, and he sure in hell didn't want us to be silent about it. And so for me, that's how I show up in the world. I show up because I believe that this is what my faith tells me to do. I also believe that I don't live for this world. I don't live for Cory. I don't live for the guy down the street who's criticizing me. I don't live for my parents. I don't live for anyone. I live for this moment that's going to come where I'm going to stand before my Lord, and my Lord's going to be like, I gave you blessings. I gave you talent. I gave you skills. I gave you eyes and hands, and I gave you all these things. And you didn't stand up for my creation. You know, you didn't honor God with love and compassion and justice. And that's what I'm doing, because I want to be able to stand before my Lord and have a lot of good answers and say, listen, I stood up against injustice. I fed the hungry and the homeless. I advocated. I spoke truth to power like you told us to. I even stood up to people that I love, because you told me that when I stand up against injustice, it might be against my own parents. It might be against people that I love dearly. And that should not be a barrier for me to speak truth to power. And that's what I do. And it's controversial to people. People don't want to see people who are consistent, regardless of who the people are. Democrats, Republicans, it don't matter to me. Sometimes I argue and debate people in my family that I love. Sometimes I'm willing to not speak to somebody in my family if I believe that they are holding positions that are harming someone else or a group of people. I'm just not going to do it. And I hope that, you know, God is approving of all of that. And that's kind of how I show up.
Y'all see what I mean? See, this is what I was telling y'all. Like, so when you meet people that just have a divine energy that just makes you go, yeah, I want to be that. I want to live into that. You know, when we first met, like, I don't know, 2-3 years ago, and we were talking about Donald Trump, and I'll just never forget that, like, you separated like the person from the evil, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was like, we're not out here fighting people. We're fighting ideas and evil and wickedness and unrighteousness. And I thought that was just like so compelling and so like such a great reminder about humanity. And then the last thing you just said, I think is really interesting. And I've been commenting to folks about this, because I remember when Donald Trump was in office and folks were lamenting it because of all of the reasons that we don't have to get into. And people would go, well, were you saying the same thing when Obama was in office? And now seeing that Biden is in office, and I'm watching people like yourself still go, right is right, wrong is wrong.
That's it.
It doesn't matter who's in office. It's what we believe is just and what we believe is unjust, and we're going to hold everybody accountable to that measurement.
And the earlier point that you made when I was explaining to you this concept of attacking the forces of evil, not the people doing evil. That's actually a principle of Kingian nonviolence. It's one of the principles of the civil rights movement. And it's really interesting to me that oftentimes people, particularly those who are in opposition, who like will say, you know, that they're, you know, they'll commemorate Dr. Martin Luther King and they'll put up the quotes and do that every time. It's like the time to do it. And I'm just like, we need more people to actually study Dr. King and the civil rights movement and really understand what the principles were that they were kind of following. And that one for me was one of the most important ones, because the idea about attacking the forces of evil, not the people doing evil, reminds us that evil is going to be here outside of that person. So if you're going to be someone that's going to combat anti-Black racism, combat anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, homophobia, and we can go down the list, ableism and sexism and misogyny and xenophobia. Those things outlast Donald Trump. They were here before there was a Donald Trump, and they are still here today. And so my thing is, like, when you take a campaign or someone's the president of the United States and you keep saying Donald Trump, and that's all you do all day, it's not helping anybody. You're not helping anybody, because what it is that if you're going to say that you don't want people to be deported, well, they were being deported under Obama too. And they're still being deported under Biden too. If you care about anti-Black racism and you care about police accountability, Black people were being murdered by cops way before there was ever a Donald Trump. And guess what? They've been getting murdered still after there was a Donald Trump. You know, it's this concept. We're such a narrow-minded people that we focus our energy on one man. We say, oh, this man right here is a bigot, this man, and we focus on that. But why don't we start putting things in context? You know, what are you willing to do to address anti-Black racism that is systematic, that is not just one guy saying anti-Black things or one man saying things that are Islamophobic or anti-Semitic? There are systems in place in this country that keep our people down. It's not one man. That man's going, and one day he's not going to be around. And you won't hear his bigotry or her bigotry anymore. But I promise you, the bigotry that they were professing is still going to be here. And what are you willing to do about that? And that's the thing that I feel like we need more consistency about. about understanding the systems that we're trying to. I'm not about bringing any one man down. It wasn't for me just about bringing Donald Trump down. We needed to defeat Donald Trump. We couldn't have him for another 4 years, nor his administration. But I wasn't put that my whole life for 4 years wasn't about, oh, everything that I do, every time I get up, every time I organize, this is about taking Donald Trump down. That wasn't my goal. And it wasn't the goal of the Women's March either. People assumed that we were marching because of Donald Trump, but that wasn't why we were marching, which is why we had unity principles, which is why we told people this is what we march for, not against, because people think that is strategic. It's not. It's not what people of color want you to do. It's not what Black people want you to do. Black people want you to get to the root of the problem. They want you to be radical in your organizing. And trust me when I tell you, enslavement, mass incarceration, new Jim Crow that we experience is not and has nothing to do with man or woman. It's the systems that create those situations that we find people in.
100%. Now you just mentioned the Women's March that happened 4 years ago now, January 21st. You and Tamika Mallory. I don't remember who all else was involved in it, but I know you and Tamika were
Carmen Perez and Bob Bland and many other women.
So looking back at 4 years later, like what did you hope to accomplish with it, and like what impact have you seen since then?
Absolutely. I mean, the Women's March, and you know me, Cory, I'm just going to tell the truth. It was a very difficult space for me to organize in. A lot of people were experiencing the product that we were putting out, so that you came to the march and you were like, wow, this is so inspirational. Like, I'm here and look at all these people. People watched us on the Day Without a Woman, which was a day that we did a strike, and they watched the Women's March leaders get arrested. And they were like, this is so inspirational. We did the largest women's convention at the time in 40 years. The last time there was a large women's convention was in 1977 in Houston, Texas, that Shirley Chisholm was a part of. And so we did one in 2017. So every time there was a product, people were like, wow. But I'm not going to lie to you. I was going to the hospital. I had ulcers. It was a very difficult space for me to organize. And the reason was because it was a lot of labor. Women of color having to explain to white women that Donald Trump was not our problem, that their problem was much larger than that. Having to explain to white women that criminal justice it is a women's rights issue. Immigrant rights are women's rights issues. You know, being able to take women out of a box of equity and reproductive rights. Of course, we care about reproductive rights. Of course, we don't want the government to be involved in the choices that I want to make for my family and for my body. But that's not my top priority issue always, you know, and it's not the top. We cannot impose those issues as being the top priority for every woman in America. So there was a lot of, you know, courageous conversations, we were calling them at the time, you know, bringing women. And remember, we were organizing a women's march with women who've never organized in their lives. Like, they all told us, like, we never marched before. We don't know how to organize. We're not activists. But they were passionate, and they were really appalled by what Donald Trump was putting out in such a public, vulgar manner. And so we welcomed them, and we wanted to move forward. The things that we accomplished in the Women's March are something that are historic. There's no way to take that away from us. You know this, during the 4 years, there were many attacks on the character of myself and Tamika Mallory in particular. That's what you get for being a bold Black woman in America. It's what you get for being a bold, unapologetic Palestinian Muslim American. But we kept moving forward. So not only have we organized the largest single day demonstration in American history, no one has beat us yet. So till today, 2021, it is the largest single day demonstration in American history. We also said we were going to take back the House. That was a declaration that we made in 2017, and we did that in 2018. But that wasn't enough for us just to take back the House. And of course, it wasn't just the work of the Women's March, right? It was what I believe was the energy that we put out immediately after the inauguration of Donald Trump. We set a path for people to get to work, to build more activism around the country, to build what they called the resistance. And one of the things we said was, we want to make history, because that's what it seems like. We're a history making group. And so in 2018, not only did we win back Congress, we actually elected over 112 women to Congress. We sent the first 2 Latinas from Texas ever in history to Congress. We sent the first 2 Native American women ever to go to Congress. We sent the first Black woman from Massachusetts. We sent the youngest Black woman to ever go to Congress. We sent the youngest woman to go to Congress ever. We sent 2 of the first Muslim American women to ever go to Congress. And of course, as you know, my favorite of them all, we sent the first Palestinian American woman to Congress. So it was not just this idea of we're going to win back the House. We sent women leadership there. And we also sent women of color there. We sent powerful, bold, brave progressives that are literally every day. It's like the power and energy, like you're talking about, keep the same energy. Like I want Rashida Ilhan energy. You know what I'm saying? I want Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And then in 2020, we added Cory Bush from St. Louis. I mean, Cory Bush is a manifestation, not just of the last 4 years of Donald Trump, of all of the racial justice kind of Black Lives Matter movements that we saw all over the years. Cory Bush is a Black woman. She's a Ferguson protester. She was part of the uprisings in Ferguson around Mike Brown. At some point, she was homeless. She was going to school at night. She was a single mom. I mean, this is a woman from the hood, and she understands the problem. She understands what the injustice is. And guess what? She was closest, and we knew she was closest to the solution. She ran in 2018, and we tried to get her as part of the class, and then she almost won, didn't win all the way. And guess what happened? She wins in 2020. And so that's another thing, women not giving up, women like, I'm coming back for more. And Cory Bush is there. So that was another thing that I saw that was really important about what the Women's March set up. We set up this idea that any woman, I don't care if you're a social worker, a mom, a school teacher, get up and run for office. Stop waiting for everybody else to be your leader. Stop waiting for everyone else to make change. You can make change. And we saw moms, we saw social workers, teachers, lawyers get up and run and win. And that's what democracy is supposed to be about.
It's amazing, man. And tomorrow is International Women's Day. For just in case there's somebody watching this after hearing you say everything you just said about the power of women, why is it such an important time for us to stop and recognize women in the world?
You know, women, and you know, I'm not, you know, people will question like my feminist credentials, obviously, because I'm Muslim, I wear hijab, and I have all these assumptions about, you know, who I am and what I stand for. I actually come from a faith that is quite empowering for women. You know, it teaches me self-agency and choice and power. I mean, Islam teaches me that, you know, I can work and have an income and I don't have to share my income with anyone. I'm not responsible for paying bills and doing things like that unless I want to do that. I come from a faith with a prophet that says, educate your daughters, that your daughters will send you to heaven. They didn't say your sons are going to send you there. They said your daughters are going to send you to heaven. Heaven lays at the feet of our mothers, right? It doesn't say heaven lays at the feet of our fathers. They said heaven lays at the feet of our mothers. So I come from this very empowering faith, and that's the kind of feminism that I bring to the moment and to the movement. I bring a feminism that also includes my son. You know, Tamika has said this, actually, she started this at the Women's Convention, and she told women, white women, she said, listen, a feminism that doesn't include men is not my feminism. If it doesn't include the safety and it doesn't include my male relatives and family being able to thrive and walk in their community safely, this is not the kind of feminism that I want. Women bring a lot to our movements. They are strategic. They are bold. They are also just have that. It's just nature to us. They have a kind of a nurturing, you know, we want to nurture, we want to uplift. And I'm not saying, of course, that's every woman, but that's just the instinct that God gave us, and anything against that is against God's nature. But I celebrate women all over the world, and I celebrate women who resist all over the world. I celebrate women who resist against Muslim regimes. I celebrate women who are going up against, you know, snipers and tanks in South America. I celebrate Black women who have sacrificed so much for us, or even for someone like me, just to be here today. I celebrate Indigenous women who have endured torture and just deletion, literally, of who they are and where they came from. And I honor, you know, our great grandmothers. And I think that, you know, being able to stand here, you know, and I remember this at the Women's March in 2017, my mother's mother was still alive, and she was watching me on an iPad all the way in Palestine. And I said that at the Women's March, I said, I am my grandmother's wildest dream manifested as a Palestinian Muslim American woman standing on the largest stage at that moment in the United States of America. Actually, it was a worldwide stage. And I got to see my grandmother, who was able to experience what we call the catastrophe, where she was displaced from her home, where she had to carry her children on her back to go to safety during unfortunate 1948, but then also in 1967. Has lived under the longest military occupation in modern history. And here comes her hijab-wearing Palestinian granddaughter, who's not born in Palestine, who's standing on a stage declaring that unapologeticness. It's something that I gave my grandmother before she passed away. So women are incredible. and we need to celebrate them. I know this, Cory, that if women in America decided one day that we weren't going to go to work, that we weren't going to shop, we weren't going to work, we weren't going to contribute, we were just going to sit home and do nothing, this country would crumble, literally. And I think one day we will have the courage to do that, to say, I'm willing to sacrifice this one day to show this country that they need to heed to our rights, that we need to have pay equity, reproductive rights. We need to protect undocumented women. We need to protect Black women in this country. We need to protect Indigenous women in this country. And the only way this country is going to understand is through their pockets. And one day I hope to see an economic strike led by women in the country.
Well, because we're not here to be bystanders, right? So like you wrote that book. Yes. I listened to it. It's amazing. The stories are incredible. Could you just, before we go, could you talk about the stories from that book that most resonate with you? I know you're the writer, but you live those stories. So which ones, like in those books, are you like, in that book, are you like, yeah, that story is like, that one really moves me still.
The one thing I will say before I tell you one story that really resonates with me is that the reason why this title is important is because this book was written under a Bush administration. Well, the stories in it are Bush administration, Obama administration, and Trump. So the idea of this book is like, we're not here to be bystanders ever. This is not a book, to be clear, about Donald Trump. It's not a book about the last 4 years, which a lot of people might assume because it came out kind of during that time. I did not want to write a book about Donald Trump. I wanted to write a timeless book, a classic, something that people could pick up, 50 years from now. One of the stories that really resonates with me and just kind of illustrates the type of organizing, the type of commitment, is a chapter that I recollected about the March to Justice. This was after the murder of Eric Garner in Staten Island, New York. We all watched, everybody, millions of people around the world watched a father and grandfather choked by an NYPD police officer with other police officers standing around for what they allege was selling loosies, which is not harming anybody, right? And so this man literally died on television, on video for all of us to watch. And I remember being around, and as you know, I organize a lot with young Black people, and they were really distraught about it. They were like, what do you mean? There was a video, everybody watched it, no one's doing anything. The cop still has a job, no one's getting fired, no one's getting, held accountable. And then there was a 9 indictment that came on, and that really set the kids, like they were just outraged. So one day we were sitting at a meeting in Mr. Belafonte's office, and that's why this book is so important to me, because Mr. Harry Belafonte, who just celebrated his 94th birthday, is a mentor of mine, and he wrote the foreword to my book. And we were in his office. We used to organize out of the Belafonte Enterprises. And so we were sitting around, and the kids are like, this is outrageous. There's some of them are college students. Like, what do we do? Nobody cares about Black people. Like, it doesn't matter if we die on video. And they're, having this long conversation. And then Tamika Mallory says, well, we got to do something out of the box. We got to do something that nobody would expect us to do. What is it, Tamika? Oh, we're going to march from New York City, from Staten Island to Washington, D.C., and we're going to bring with us 3 pieces of legislation, and we're going to march down Route 1, and we're going to go all the way. I'm not going to lie to you. I was like, excuse me, do you know that New York City to Washington, D.C. is about 250 miles, just so we're all clear. And we might have to walk through about 5 states to get there. And the young people jumped on it. They said, they literally were like, we're taking off school. Other organizers joined us. We had literally elders that joined us from the Young Lords, folks that were part of the Black Panther Party. It was young and old. It was allies. And we marched about 150 of us all the way down Route 1 from New York to Washington, D.C. And it was one of the most prophetic experiences of my life, what it feels like to walk down, quiet highways, reflecting on life and reflecting on what we were doing, and also experiencing what we experienced. We walked through Rising Sun, Maryland, one of the homes of the Ku Klux Klan. Young people saw Confederate flags. They saw, I literally told a story in my book about seeing a little cart. It said cupcake cart, but it was KKK instead of CCC. Kids that were called the N-word, people were blowing smoke at us in their cars, and the kids were so distraught about it, but it was also a powerful experience for them to really experience what their ancestors experienced. And then at the end of the March to Justice, being able to meet up with Congressman John Conyers, who's now no longer with us, and other elders that said, to us, that the caravan has arrived, that seeing us as kind of this new generation of civil rights activists willing to put this on our bodies. And so the whole experience was moving In fact, right before we reached Washington, D.C., we were still in Baltimore. We had learned that day sitting in Empowerment Temple Church, literally in Baltimore on a Sunday morning, we found out that Freddie Gray died. And so we took a detour on our march from Baltimore to Washington, D.C. to the Western District of Baltimore. And the experience we had being amongst the people of Baltimore who were standing there outraged outside a police department, fighting for justice for Freddie Gray. There was a story that I tell there watching Tamika, who's this little, 115-pound woman who a cop walks out of the police department and people recognize him. He's one of the police officers that had arrested Freddie Gray. And the young Black men immediately went towards the car. And I watched Tamika put herself, little body, between the police car and these young Black men to tell them, you are worthy. This guy doesn't mean anything to me, but your safety, we don't need another Freddie Gray, and really trying to instill some worth in them. This is not worth it. So I've gotten to experience a lot of those really powerful moments. I mean, even though I wrote my own book, I've read it a few times. And just when I want to remind myself what I've been through and where I'm going, and I promise you'll shed a tear or two in this book. It's my experience. It's my family's experience. It's my community's experience. And really, Cory, it is my gift to my community. The reason why I even wrote the book was because I didn't have time to write a book. I really fought back against this literary agent that was following me around everywhere, being like, this is the moment, got to do it now. And I said, lady, do I look like somebody who got time to write a book? And she said, I know, I understand. And she said something to me that really resonated. And she said, you could open doors for people in your community. Stories like yours are not told, and they're not given these big platforms. And then I reflected on that, and then I said to myself, she's right. And not only that, at the time when I wrote this book, I was going through some really devastating death threats, like live open investigations, security at my house. It was really bad. And I thought to myself, you know what, I might not be around for long. And so what I could do, Cory, is give my family something to be proud of, because as you know, the media is going to say what they want to say about who I am and about what my legacy is. And I had a responsibility to make sure that I left behind something that told my story from my own mouth, from my own experience. And this is what it is. So no matter what happens to me and whatever the media says about when I die, I do know that this book is going to be this book that my kids say, this is who my mom was. My grandkids will say, this is who my grandmother was. And that's why I think I would appreciate people. It's in paperback now, so it's light.
It's in paperback. I saw it the other day. I was proud of you.
Yeah, it's in paperback now. And then next year I have a young adult book, because me, I wanna get to the young ones, and so I have a young adult book coming out next year that I'm really excited about.
Linda, you are a gift to all of us. Thanks for leading through pain, leading through the anxiety, leading through, like you said, death threats, all that stuff. It's for most of us unimaginable to have to live unapologetically at the literal threat of our lives. Most of us, the only threat we have is if we put something controversial on Facebook, somebody might comment that we don't like. We're not dealing with people actually threatening to take us out of here. And the fact that you continue to move forward is I think I tell you this every time I talk to you, is so inspiring. So thanks for that. Thanks for this 32 minutes you spent with us. I really appreciate you. Folks, that was it. That's Linda Sarsour. That's man, if you watch this for 35 minutes and have not shared it, I don't know why you didn't. But if you found this inspiring,
there's a lot of shares out there. I'm monitoring your content.
It is. This was a conversation that I hope people hear. And we probably have some dummies say some dumb stuff, but that is what it is.
Okay.
All right, everybody. Grace and peace till next time.